While the battle over raising the debt ceiling plays out in Washington, D.C., many New Mexicans are asking the debt what? So here to tell us if the debate is more political theater than a real threat is Tom Crow. And that is, of course, a wonderful, wonderful addition to our New Mexico-style family today, because Tom is the president of Crow Financial Advisors, and we really need some questions answered. So first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
It's good to have you. I mean, we are hearing the headlines and we are listening to all of the talk from the president and the Speaker of the House, but what is the debt ceiling? Please enlighten us.
Well, it's supposed to be an upper limit on the amount of money that the government can borrow to pay for everything if they want to, whether it's interest on debt or any social programs. It's the amount they can borrow and spend.
Okay, so that's the ceiling.
That's the ceiling.
What it means. Okay, so now what is our country's current debt limit?
Well, we hit it, brushed up against it in May at about $14.3 trillion.
Okay, so it's really only been a couple months that we hit it. Okay, so now we're in a bad position, because if it's been raised so many times over the years and it's constantly getting raised higher and higher and higher, what's the big deal now, and why are we in this position where we're talking about it like it's, you know, we're leading into a depression?
Well, and like you said, it's been raised 60 times over about the past 100 years. It's never really stopped the government from spending more money. Every time they run up against it, they're just able to raise it. In theory, it has to be raised.
Why?
Just to allow us to spend more money.
Okay. Well, it's kind of like, I mean, you think of your own personal lives. I mean, forget the whole government as a whole, but when you have your own credit card and you're asking for credit card increases because you just can't pay it off yet and you still need the money.
You need more, you need to extend it.
Right, so now we're looking at this as a whole and something that's going on across the entire country, and now it's causing a lot of problems for the entire country. And so where are we going right now with this?
Well, and a lot of that's the theater as to whether or not it's a real problem, or whether or not both sides are trying to use this to their political advantage to get what they want.
Okay, well, so I use the analogy of myself. If I need to get a credit limit raised, okay, and what happens when they turn me down? Well, now I can't spend more money. So what happens for the country when they don't get the allowance to have the limit raised?
Well, that's the default that they're talking about right now. And what may happen is a partial shutdown. It means that we can't borrow any more money. It means that we only get to spend what comes in taxes. The latest reports are that we really actually have enough to meet our minimum obligations for the next month.
For the next month, that's it. And then what happens past the month?
We continue along that line where there's just no more money to spend.
Well, okay, so can the U.S. actually default on its debt?
Constitutionally, no. The 14th Amendment says you cannot call the credit quality of the United States into question, and that's subject to a lot of interpretation, but it means to me that we can't default on our debt. We always pay our debts. Right.
Well, and we have to continue to be able to do it, but we are in a deficit. So let me ask you this. Does the deficit actually have anything to do with the debt ceiling?
Oh, yeah. The deficit, well, there's different terminology, but the deficit is this year. That is the $1.40 we're spending for every dollar we're taking in. The debt is the long-term cumulative effect of years of that kind of practice, and it's at $14.3 trillion.
Are we just all living so way above our means? Is this what's happening?
That is exactly what's happened, and it's been going on for a long time.
Oh, so so now, so you explain the deficit versus the debt ceiling. So now how is the deficit affecting us?
The deficit affects us in several ways. Primarily, debt, whether public or private, is, in my opinion, a lost opportunity. At some point, you have to ask yourself, what could you personally, or what could our government be doing with that money we're paying in interest somewhere else? And in terms of a time deficit, what could Congress and the President be discussing or dealing with, rather than this debate that they've been just totally mired in for the last 3 weeks, months? And if the other aspect of that is what happens if the credit rating agencies come in and cut our credit rating.
Well, what would happen? That is scary, isn't it?
That means we will have to continue to sell government treasuries, we'll have to pay higher interest to entice buyers that want to come in and buy that debt. But we'll have to pay more for it. And
then that will in turn put us in more debt, won't it?
That'll put us in more debt. Our interest payments go up. and it just scrapes off more of that money that we had to spend on other programs. Now we're spending on interest.
Well, and I guess that kind of also goes back to what you were saying about it being kind of a little bit like the theater, because it is becoming a little over dramatized. And you said that what's happening is there's so much focus on that, and some of the other things that our government needs to be focusing on is kind of getting lost in the shadows.
Yep.
But at the same time, if we just let this fall by the wayside and we don't put a lot of focus on it, then we could end up in greater debt than we're already in.
A partial shutdown would be a huge hit on the economy.
Absolutely. And I mean, do you see us going in that direction? Do you see that as a likelihood?
I hope not, but it seems like there are some people almost committed to making that happen.
Well, I mean, this is bad news for Americans because there are a lot of people who are already struggling with their own debt. As I said, you know, my own self, I look at my own credit cards. So what would be your short-term and your long-term advice to people?
In times of uncertainty, the last thing you want to do is commit yourself to future expenses when your future income may be in question.
Okay.
My immediate advice would be don't trade debt for stuff. You really don't want to do that. It's a bad position to be in.
Okay.
And if you do it for long enough, what happens is your stuff ends up owning you.
Oh, that's a very good way of looking at it. And what about the stock market? A lot of people invested in the stock market, and you know, it tanked last time when millions of Americans were ruined financially, of course. And if we don't have investments, then what happens? I mean, should we worry about that?
Well, if you have a 401k or you own any mutual funds, a lot of people don't understand if you own those things, you probably are in the stock market, at least to some extent.
Good point.
Markets don't like uncertainty, and certainly all this debate and the lack of a decision or any direction has put a lot of uncertainty in the markets, and I expect, you know, for right now, probably not a buy and hold market, and it's going to be very overreactive to any kind of headlines or news.
Absolutely, and I think we could spend the whole hour talking about this. There's so much to talk about, so I want people to know how they can get more information from you and a little bit more about what you do. So let's give them that contact information.
So, Tom Crow, Crow Financial Advisors. My phone number in Albuquerque, 243-2281. The website is crowfa.com. And also involved with a nonprofit educational foundation, Focus on the Future, founded by Skip Cowan in 1988. It's all about financial literacy, economic education, focusonthefuture.tv, and a lot of free videos there to be downloaded.
And definitely great advice for parents to watch with their kids.
Absolutely.
Teach them young. I mean, that's really the way to go, and what you're doing is really helping with that effort in itself. So thank you so much, Tom. It was great to have you here. Really helpful information. We'd love to have you back again to talk some more.